The luminous pavilion had been designed by someone who believed architecture should induce both awe and mild vertigo. Crystalline spires rose hundreds of feet above the main floor, refracting light into patterns that shifted with the planet's rotation. Floating gardens drifted through the upper reaches like dreams made solid, trailing bioluminescent vines that pulsed in rhythm with music humans couldn't quite hear. The effect was beautiful, overwhelming, and slightly nauseating if you stared at it too long. Sergeant Rowan Thrace tried not to stare at it. He had a job to do, which involved standing at attention near the royal dais and looking professionally intimidating, while dignitaries from a dozen species discussed matters so far above his pay grade they might as well be occurring in a different dimension. He was good at standing. 6 years of military service had perfected his ability to remain motionless for hours, while his mind wandered through increasingly bizarre tangents. Currently, he was wondering whether the floating gardens required maintenance, or if they were some kind of self-sustaining ecosystem. Also whether the catering staff got hazard pay for serving food that occasionally levitated off the plates. The Celestial Gathering happened once per decade, a diplomatic festival where allied species celebrated their achievements and negotiated future treaties. This year's event was hosted by the Etherian Empire on their homeworld of Ethara Prime, and they'd apparently decided to demonstrate why their civilization had been thriving for millennia, while humanity was still figuring out faster-than-light travel. Rowan was part of the human security detail, one of 20 soldiers assigned to protect their diplomatic delegation and look imposing in dress uniform. His role was simple. Stand here, don't touch anything that glows, and intervene only if someone attempts assassination or starts a war. So far, neither had occurred, which was honestly disappointing given how boring the alternative was. The Etherian royal family presided from a raised dais that somehow managed to be elevated without looking pretentious. Queen Lysara Kale sat on a throne that appeared to be carved from solidified starlight, her luminescent skin shifting through shades of deep blue and silver, colors that Rowan's briefing materials claimed indicated regal composure. Her ears rose gracefully from her skull in that distinctive Etherian way, elegant and alien, and somehow perfectly suited to her bearing. Beside her sat Princess Niara Kale, younger than her mother but already displaying the kind of presence that made people pay attention. Her luminescence skewed toward warmer tones, gold and amber that flickered occasionally toward pink, in ways the briefing materials hadn't explained. She'd been circulating through the crowd for the past hour, performing diplomatic duties with practiced grace, speaking to representatives from species Rowan couldn't identify without his datapad. She was heading in his direction now. Rowan's training kicked in automatically: maintain position, acknowledge royalty if directly addressed, otherwise remain professionally invisible. He'd gotten good at professional invisibility over the years. It was a survival skill in the military. Don't attract attention from officers. Don't volunteer for anything that sounds important. Keep your head down and your record clean. Princess Niara stopped directly in front of him, her eyes shifting between gold and something darker, more intense, fixed on his face with unsettling focus. Rowan maintained eye contact for exactly 2 seconds before looking slightly past her left shoulder, the approved protocol for acknowledging royalty without presuming familiarity. She studied him like he was a particularly interesting specimen under analysis. Rowan had no idea what she was looking for, and desperately hoped it wasn't anything that would require him to do something beyond standing still. Then she turned to her mother and spoke in clear, carrying tones that cut through the ambient conversation. "I want this human, Mother." The pavilion went silent, not gradually, not politely, but with the sudden absolute quiet that follows statements that fundamentally alter reality. Conversations died mid-sentence. Music stuttered to a halt. Even the floating gardens seemed to pause their lazy drifting. Rowan's brain performed several operations simultaneously. Registered the words, rejected their meaning as impossible, checked whether he'd misheard, concluded he probably hadn't, and began systematically panicking while his exterior remained perfectly still, because training ran deeper than comprehension. Queen Lysara's luminescent skin went through a rapid color transition, blue to white to something that looked like barely contained fury filtered through diplomatic necessity. Every Etherian in the pavilion had gone similarly pale, their skin reflecting shock in ways human expressions couldn't quite match. Princess Niara seemed unconcerned by the reaction she'd caused. She looked back at Rowan, and her luminescence had settled on a warm gold that suggested satisfaction or determination or possibly both. "Your name, soldier?" she asked. Rowan's mouth operated on autopilot while his brain tried to catch up. "Sergeant Rowan Thrace, Your Highness. Human Alliance Defense Forces, Security Detail." "Sergeant Rowan Thrace," she repeated, like she was testing how the syllables fit together. "I invoke the claim right. You are chosen as consort before these witnesses. Let the records show my words and intent." The pavilion erupted. Etherians began speaking rapidly in their own language, voices overlapping in what sounded like either heated debate or collective panic. Human diplomats were making urgent gestures at their aides. General Kovacs, head of the human security detail, looked like he'd been physically struck. Rowan remained at attention because he had no idea what else to do. His training hadn't covered what to do when an alien princess publicly claims you for reasons you don't understand. That scenario must have been in the advanced diplomatic protocols they didn't teach enlisted personnel. Queen Lysara rose from her throne with movements that suggested barely controlled rage wrapped in royal dignity. "Niara, we will speak privately, immediately." "Of course, Mother," Princess Niara said with perfect composure. She looked at Rowan one more time. "I will see you shortly, Sergeant. Please don't flee the planet. It would complicate the proceedings significantly." Then she followed her mother from the dais, leaving Rowan standing in the center of what felt like the galaxy's most expensive diplomatic incident, surrounded by hundreds of witnesses who were all staring at him like he'd grown a second head. Lieutenant Chen appeared at his elbow, her expression carefully neutral in the way that meant she was screaming internally. "Sergeant Thrace, you're going to need to come with me. Now would be good. Right now. Immediately." Rowan followed her through the crowd, which parted for them with the kind of careful distance usually reserved for unexploded ordnance. Behind them, the gathering descended into what his grandmother would have called a situation, which was her polite term for absolute chaos. As they exited the pavilion into a service corridor, Chen finally spoke. "So, that happened." "Yes, ma'am." "Any idea why?" "No, ma'am." "Outstanding, love that for us, just fantastic." She was walking fast enough that Rowan had to stretch his stride to keep up. "You're being taken to a diplomatic suite for debriefing. Multiple governments want to talk to you, possibly yell at you. Definitely figure out what the hell just happened and how to make it unhappen." "I didn't do anything, ma'am." "I know, but you're somehow at the center of an interstellar incident anyway, which is impressively terrible luck even for our unit." She stopped at a secure door, palm scanning for access. "For what it's worth, Thrace, I don't think you did anything wrong, but you're about to become very important to very powerful people, and that's usually worse than being wrong." The door opened onto a suite that was probably luxurious by diplomatic standards and terrifying by enlisted soldier who just wants to do his job standards. Half a dozen people waited inside. Human officials, Etherian liaisons, and at least 2 species Rowan didn't recognize. General Kovacs looked at him with an expression that combined sympathy, frustration, and the exhausted resignation of someone whose day had just gotten exponentially more complicated. "Sergeant Thrace," he said, "sit down. We need to explain exactly how thoroughly your life just changed, and you're probably going to want to be sitting for it." Rowan sat. Outside the window, Ethara Prime's twin moons were rising over crystalline towers that caught their light, and scattered it across the city in patterns that looked almost like laughter. His grandmother had been right. Situations were definitely worse than problems. The diplomatic suite had furniture that seemed designed to make humans feel simultaneously welcomed and inadequate. Chairs that adjusted to body weight but never quite felt stable. Tables that hovered at perfect height but occasionally drifted. Lighting that was neither too bright nor too dim, but somehow made everything look slightly surreal. Rowan sat in one of the unstable chairs and listened to people explain how his life had ended. "The claim right," said Ambassador Patel, a woman whose diplomatic career had probably not prepared her for this specific nightmare, "is an ancient Etherian tradition. When invoked by royalty in public with clear intent before witnesses, it's legally binding under their law. Princess Niara has named you as her chosen consort." "Consort," Rowan repeated. The word felt foreign in his mouth, like trying to speak a language he'd never learned. "Think of it as somewhere between spouse, political partner, and succession authority," Patel continued. "The person claimed gains immediate legal standing in Etherian government. You would have influence over succession rights, access to royal decision-making, protection under their highest laws." "I'm a sergeant," Rowan said. "I guard doors. I file reports. I once spent 3 weeks cataloging ammunition inventory. This is clearly a mistake." "It's not a mistake," said an Etherian liaison whose name Rowan had already forgotten in the chaos. His luminescence was a nervous flickering between blue and white. "The princess invoked the right properly. The words were correct. The intent was clear. Witnesses recorded everything. By our law, the claim stands unless formally dissolved through proceedings that typically take years." General Kovacs looked like he'd aged a decade in the last hour. "Can he refuse?" "Yes," the Etherian liaison said. "But refusal would be interpreted as rejecting the royal line entirely. It's considered a profound insult, given how critical the human-Etherian alliance is." He trailed off, letting implications fill the silence. Patel picked up where he left off. "The Etherian Empire provides us with advanced medical technology, serves as mediator with species we haven't successfully negotiated with, and maintains the trade routes that supply our outer colonies. If this alliance fractures over perceived insult to their royal family, we're looking at economic and diplomatic catastrophe. So I can't refuse without destroying interstellar relations," Rowan said slowly. "But if I accept, I become part of Etherian royal politics that I know nothing about." "Essentially, yes." Rowan stared at his hands. They were calloused from maintenance work, scarred from training exercises, completely ordinary hands belonging to a completely ordinary soldier who'd somehow ended up in the least ordinary situation possible. "Why me?" he asked. "I'm not important, I'm not politically connected, I'm just security detail." "We don't know," Kovacs admitted. "That's one of many questions we need answered. You're being granted a 12-hour consideration period before formal proceedings begin. During that time, you'll meet with Princess Niara to discuss the situation. Maybe she can explain what the hell she was thinking." The meeting devolved into procedural discussion, security protocols, communication restrictions, legal frameworks spanning multiple jurisdictions. Rowan stopped paying close attention somewhere around the third reference to unprecedented diplomatic complexity, and started wondering whether he could just resign from the military and disappear into a remote colony somewhere. Probably not. He was pretty sure you couldn't escape interstellar incidents through resignation letters. Eventually, they released him to his assigned quarters, a room 3 times the size of his barracks bunk, with a view of the palace gardens and furniture that probably cost more than his annual salary. 2 guards stood outside, one human and one Etherian, which suggested nobody was entirely sure whose authority he fell under anymore. He lay on a bed that adjusted to his body contours and stared at the ceiling, which displayed a slowly shifting starfield. Probably real-time astronomical data, probably cost a fortune, probably wasted on someone who just wanted to go back to guarding doors and cataloging ammunition. Someone knocked 8 hours later. Rowan had managed perhaps 90 minutes of sleep, most of it involving stress dreams where he filed reports that kept multiplying exponentially. The Etherian guard opened the door to reveal Princess Niara, alone except for a single attendant who remained in the corridor. Her luminescence had settled into warm amber tones that suggested calm determination. "Sergeant Thrace," she said, "may I come in?" "It's your palace, Your Highness. It's your quarters. Consent matters even in complicated situations." She waited at the threshold until Rowan gestured her inside. She settled into one of the impossible chairs with natural grace. Rowan remained standing because sitting felt too casual for whatever conversation was about to happen. "You're angry," she observed. "I'm confused. Anger requires understanding what's happening first." "Fair." She studied him with that same intense focus from the pavilion. "I imagine you have questions." "I have so many questions that they're forming a queue. Why did you invoke the claim right? Why me? Did you plan this, or was it some kind of impulse?" "I planned it," Niara said calmly. "I've been studying human-Etherian relations for 3 years. I believe our alliance is threatened by factions in both governments who prefer isolation over cooperation. By claiming a human consort publicly, I'm forcing both sides to commit or admit they'd rather separate." Rowan processed this. "So you used me as a political weapon without warning or consent?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "It was strategically necessary and ethically questionable. I apologize for the latter while I realize. I also know your career involved following orders that sent you to conflicts you didn't start, protecting interests you had no stake in, and accepting that your life mattered less than strategic objectives." Her luminescence flickered briefly toward something darker. "I'm not claiming moral superiority. I'm offering you something different. The ability to actually influence the systems that deploy you." She pulled out a data crystal, its surface shifting with embedded light. "This contains intelligence files showing threats to the Alliance. Etherian nobles who resent human expansion into what they consider our sphere of influence. Human corporations seeking to exploit our resources without fair compensation. Diplomatic incidents that weren't accidents but deliberate provocations designed to create tension." Rowan took the crystal carefully. "Why show me this?" "Because, as my claimed consort, you have legal standing to review it and act on it. Because the people profiting from interspecies tension will move to eliminate you before the claim can be ratified. Because I need someone I can trust who isn't already embedded in the corruption." She paused. "And because when I researched the human security detail, your record showed something unusual. You've never filed a false report, never compromised an investigation to protect superior officers, never looked away from problems because addressing them was inconvenient. That's just basic honesty. It's rarer than you think, especially at the levels where real decisions happen." Rowan looked at the data crystal, then at the princess who'd upended his entire existence. "If I refuse the claim, the Alliance suffers. If I accept, I become a target for everyone who wants the Alliance to fail. Either way, I lose my normal life." "Yes," Niara said. "I'm truly sorry about that, but your normal life involved being expendable. This way, at least you're expendable for something that might actually matter." It was possibly the worst recruitment pitch Rowan had ever heard. It was also uncomfortably honest. "I need time to think," he said finally. "You have 12 hours before proceedings begin. Use them well." She stood, moving toward the door with that same fluid grace. "For what it's worth, Sergeant, I didn't choose you randomly. I chose you because when I watched the security detail, you were the only one who looked at the gathering like you were analyzing threats rather than being impressed by spectacle. Soldiers who do their jobs without performing them are rare." She left, and Rowan was alone with a data crystal containing classified intelligence and a choice that would define the rest of his life. He inserted the crystal into his personal datapad and began reading. The files were damning. Financial transactions linking Etherian isolationist nobles with human supremacist organizations. Trade agreements sabotaged through deliberate misunderstandings. Joint military operations mysteriously failing due to intelligence sharing complications. A pattern of coordination designed to maintain profitable tension while preventing actual cooperation. Rowan read through the night, his military training analyzing patterns and connections. By dawn, he'd reached two conclusions. The conspiracy was real and extensive, and Princess Niara was either brilliant or insane for thinking one symbolic consort could help address it. Possibly both. Lieutenant Chen visited at dawn with coffee that tasted like Earth rather than alien approximations. So, reading classified intelligence in your fancy quarters, how's the consideration period going? I'm being asked to accept a position I'm unqualified for to fight a conspiracy I barely understand, because an alien princess thinks my record of basic competence makes me trustworthy. Yeah, that tracks. Chen sat in one of the impossible chairs and immediately looked uncomfortable. For what it's worth, the squad thinks you should do it. The squad thinks I should become an alien princess's consort. The squad thinks you should do whatever doesn't get you killed, but if you're going to be in danger either way, might as well be in danger for something interesting. She paused. Also, Martinez has a betting pool going on how long you survive court politics. Current odds are 3 weeks. That's encouraging. He's pessimistic. I'm betting on 6 months minimum. She finished her terrible coffee. Seriously though, Thrace, I've served with you for 4 years. You're the most aggressively competent, boring person I know. Maybe that's exactly what complicated situations need, someone who just does the work without drama. After she left, Rowan stared at his datapad displaying evidence of conspiracy and corruption. He thought about his career trajectory, following orders, guarding doors, being professionally invisible. He thought about Martinez's betting pool and whether 3 weeks was realistic or generous. He thought about Princess Niara's offer, lose your normal life but maybe influence the systems that had always controlled it. When the 12 hours expired, Rowan informed General Kovacs that he would accept the claim right and see where this impossible situation led. Kovacs looked simultaneously relieved and concerned. "You're sure about this?" "No," Rowan said honestly, "but I'm sure that refusing won't make the problems disappear. At least this way I can see what I'm dealing with." That's possibly the least enthusiastic acceptance of royal consort status in galactic history. "I contain multitudes, sir. Mostly confusion and regret, but technically multitudes." Kovacs almost smiled. "Good luck, Sergeant, you're going to need it." The royal quarters they assigned Rowan made his previous diplomatic suite look like a supply closet. His rooms occupied an entire wing of the palace complex, with balconies overlooking gardens that probably required teams of specialists to maintain. The furniture actually stayed stable. The lighting adjusted automatically to human circadian rhythms. Someone had even stocked Earth-standard coffee, which suggested either impressive attention to detail or surveillance so thorough they knew his caffeine preferences. He was drinking that coffee and reviewing more intelligence files when his door chimed. The Etherian guards stationed outside, he now rated 4 personal guards, apparently, announced Princess Niara. She entered carrying data tablets and wearing simpler robes than her formal attire. Her luminescence was a businesslike amber gold that he was learning to associate with focused work mode. "Good morning, consort," she said. The title sounded strange coming from her. "I thought we should establish working protocols before the formal ratification ceremony." "Working protocols," Rowan repeated. "Right. Because we're colleagues now, not just princess and confused soldier." "Precisely." She settled at a table that rose from the floor at her approach. "First matter, security. You've been assigned personal guards, but given the threats we're facing, I want you trained in Etherian defense systems. Our technology differs from human military equipment. I can barely figure out how your furniture works. You want me learning alien weapons. I want you alive. Learning defensive systems seems preferable to relying entirely on guards who might be compromised. She pulled up tactical displays. Second matter, court protocol. You'll need to understand Etherian political structures, succession laws, and the formal procedures for addressing various noble houses. Rowan looked at the information she was presenting: complex hierarchies, ancient traditions, political nuances that made human bureaucracy look straightforward. How long does this usually take to learn? Most consorts study for years before their claims are ratified. You have 8 days. That's not enough time. No, she agreed cheerfully. But you're intelligent, adaptable, and motivated by self-preservation. We'll focus on the essential protocols and hope you don't accidentally declare war through improper hand gestures. They worked through the morning, Niara explaining Byzantine political structures while Rowan took notes and occasionally questioned whether he'd made a terrible mistake. Around midday, they were interrupted by a priority message from Queen Lysara requesting Princess Niara's immediate presence. That's probably about me, Rowan observed. Almost certainly. Niara's luminescence had shifted slightly toward the cooler tones that suggested concern. My mother is not pleased with this situation. She believes I've acted recklessly and potentially damaged our dynasty's stability. Has she tried to have the claim annulled? She's exploring options, but annulment requires proving the claim was invoked improperly or that I lacked capacity to make the declaration. Neither applies. She paused at the door. Try not to die while I'm gone. It would complicate my political position significantly. After she left, Rowan continued reviewing protocols until one of his guards, an Etherian named Kelric, whose luminescence remained professionally neutral, spoke from his post. Consort Thrace, may I offer unsolicited advice? Please. I'm collecting advice from all sources because I have no idea what I'm doing. Many in the court believe you're unsuitable for this position. They expect you to fail spectacularly, which will allow them to pressure the princess to dissolve the claim. His luminescence flickered briefly warmer. Proving them wrong would be satisfying for those of us who find court politics exhaustingly predictable. What do you suggest? Learn quickly, show respect for our customs while maintaining your own identity, and trust that the princess chose you for reasons beyond what she's publicly stated. Kelric returned to professional neutrality. Also, avoid the blue fruits at formal dinners. They ferment in human digestive systems in unfortunate ways. That's oddly specific. Previous human consorts learned this the hard way. Rowan made a mental note about blue fruits and continued studying. His afternoon was interrupted by Lieutenant Chen, who'd somehow gained access despite the enhanced security. You're in the royal wing now, she said, looking around at the opulent quarters with undisguised amazement. This is significantly nicer than our barracks. It comes with people actively trying to kill me. Fair trade-off. She handed him a secure datapad. Unofficial communication from some of your fellow soldiers. They wanted you to know that not everyone thinks you're insane for accepting this. The messages were brief and mostly consisted of dark humor about his promotion, but underneath the jokes was genuine support. Martinez had updated his betting pool. Odds on Rowan's survival had improved to 6 months, which apparently represented significant confidence. Tell them thanks, Rowan said, and that I'll try not to get assassinated before Martinez can collect his winnings. Will do. Chen hesitated at the door. Seriously though, Thrace, you've got this. You're too stubborn to fail spectacularly. The first assassination attempt came 3 days into his consideration period. Rowan was in his quarters reviewing succession law when one of the supposedly decorative sculptures in the corner emitted a sound his military training immediately recognized as a charging energy weapon. He dove behind a ridiculously expensive couch seconds before the sculpture exploded with enough force to vaporize where he'd been standing. His guards burst through the door, weapons drawn, scanning for threats. Kelrick was already calling for additional security while examining the destroyed sculpture. Shaped energy charge, remotely triggered. Someone with palace access planted this. Rowan's ears were ringing from the blast, but his training kept him functional. How long was that thing here? It was installed 2 days ago as part of routine decoration rotation. Kelrick's luminescence had gone dark red with anger, which means someone in palace operations is compromised. Princess Niara arrived within minutes, her luminescence cycling through colors Rowan hadn't seen before, probably combinations that expressed fury and concern in Etherian emotional language. Are you injured? No, paranoid military training saves lives. Rowan looked at the crater where the sculpture had been. Someone really doesn't want this claim ratified. Investigation teams are sweeping the entire wing, Niara said. Her voice was controlled, but her luminescence betrayed how rattled she was. Every decoration, every piece of furniture, every system will be examined. They found 2 more threats. Poison in his food supply that would have caused organ failure over several days, and a compromised air filter that would have gradually introduced neurotoxins into his quarters. The sophistication suggested professional assassins with intimate palace knowledge. This is what you warned me about, Rowan said, as security teams dismantled potential threats. The people profiting from alliance instability want me dead before I become a legitimate obstacle. Yes, I underestimated how quickly they'd move. Niara's luminescence had settled into a determined gold. You're being relocated to quarters adjacent to mine, with enhanced security and guards I personally trust. We have 5 days until the ratification ceremony. They'll try again. She was right. The second attempt came the following night. Poison in his evening meal, detected only because Etherian biology processed certain compounds differently, and the kitchen staff noticed the chemical signature during routine screening. The third attempt was more creative. A maintenance drone programmed to malfunction and release coolant directly into his relocated quarters while he slept. Only Kelrick's paranoid insistence on scanning every automated system prevented Rowan from suffocating in his own bed. By the 6th day, Rowan had survived 5 assassination attempts and developed the kind of hypervigilance usually reserved for active combat zones. He checked every surface before touching it, tested every drink before consuming it, and slept in 2-hour increments with his back against a wall. You look terrible, Niara observed during one of their protocol sessions. Her own luminescence had been flickering between exhaustion pale and stress dark for days. I've been targeted for assassination 5 times in less than a week. Terrible feels appropriate. The investigation has identified 17 palace staff with connections to isolationist factions. They're being detained, but the conspiracy runs deeper than we anticipated. She pulled up new intelligence files. We've intercepted communications between Etherian nobles and human corporate interests. They're coordinating timing for a final attempt before the ratification ceremony. Rowan studied the intercepts. The conspirators were getting desperate, which made them more dangerous. They know if the claim is formally ratified, I gain legal standing to investigate them directly. Right now, I'm just a diplomatic complication. After ratification, I'm an actual threat. Exactly. Niara's luminescence shifted to that determined gold again, which is why we're moving the ceremony up. Tomorrow instead of 3 days from now. We're not giving them time to coordinate another attempt. That gives me less than 24 hours to learn enough protocol to not humiliate both of us publicly. Then we'd better use the time efficiently. They worked through the night, Niara drilling him on formal procedures, while security teams swept the ceremonial hall for threats. Rowan absorbed information with the desperate focus of someone whose life literally depended on not making catastrophic mistakes. Around dawn, Queen Lysara herself visited his quarters. Her luminescence was a complex mixture of colors he couldn't fully interpret, but her expression was readable enough, resignation mixed with maternal concern. "Sergeant Thrace," she said formally, "my daughter has convinced me that accelerating the ratification is necessary for your safety. I want to be clear. I do not approve of this situation. I believe Niara acted recklessly and has placed both you and our dynasty in unnecessary danger. I appreciate your honesty, Your Majesty. However," she continued, her voice softening slightly, "I have reviewed the intelligence you and Niara have compiled. The conspiracy is real and extensive. If ratifying this claim helps expose corruption threatening our alliance, then I will support it. But understand that you are now responsible for my daughter's safety as much as she is for yours. The conspirators will target you both." "I understand, Your Majesty." She studied him with eyes that had seen decades of political maneuvering. "You are remarkably calm for someone facing both assassination and public ceremony within hours. Military training, Your Majesty. Panic is scheduled for after the immediate crisis." The Queen's luminescence flickered briefly towards something that might have been amusement. "Perhaps my daughter chose better than I initially believed. Try not to die, Sergeant. It would upset her considerably, and upset princesses make poor rulers." The ratification ceremony was scheduled for midday in the Hall of Witnesses, a space designed to accommodate thousands while making everyone feel simultaneously important and insignificant. Crystalline walls rose hundreds of feet, covered in glyphs representing every major treaty in Etherian history. The ceiling was open to sky, allowing natural light to cascade through geometric patterns that probably meant something profound. Rowan stood in a preparation chamber wearing formal attire that had been hastily modified to combine human military dress with Etherian ceremonial elements. The result was either impressively diplomatic or ridiculous. He genuinely couldn't tell which. Kelric was running final security checks, while Niara reviewed the ceremony procedures one last time. Her luminescence had settled into a focused amber that suggested she'd moved past anxiety into determined execution mode. "Remember," she said, "when Queen Lysara asks if you accept the claim, you respond with the formal phrase we practiced. Not yes, not I do. The specific words in Etherian exactly as I taught you." "I remember." Rowan had repeated the phrase approximately 400 times over the last 12 hours. It sounded like music being strangled by grammar, but he'd gotten the pronunciation close enough that Niara stopped wincing. "When you're presented to the court, you'll need to perform the gesture of acknowledgement to each noble house in hierarchical order. Do not start with the wrong house because it implies they're less important, which could trigger political conflicts lasting decades." "I know." Rowan checked his ceremonial blade, purely symbolic but apparently required. "Niara, I'm terrified and exhausted and completely out of my depth, but I can follow procedures. Trust that I'll do this properly." Her luminescence flickered warmer briefly. "I do trust you. That's why I chose you. Still think that might have been questionable judgment. Time will tell." They were interrupted by a priority alert from the security team. Kelric's luminescence went combat dark immediately. Multiple unauthorized access attempts detected in the ceremonial hall. Security is responding. "The final assassination attempt," Niara said grimly. "They're making their move while we're preparing." "Can we postpone?" Rowan asked. "No, if we show weakness now, it signals that threats can control us. We proceed as planned." She activated her personal guard. "Kelric, maximum security protocols. Anyone not on the approved list is denied entry, regardless of rank or claimed authority." "Understood, Princess." They moved toward the Hall of Witnesses, through corridors lined with additional guards. Rowan's military training had his threat assessment running constantly, analyzing sightlines, identifying potential ambush points, calculating odds that were universally terrible. The hall was packed with representatives from both Etherian and human governments, plus observers from a dozen allied species. News networks were broadcasting across multiple systems. This wasn't just a royal ceremony anymore. It was a political statement being watched by billions. Ambassador Patel caught Rowan's eye from the human delegation section. Her expression conveyed approximately 7 different warnings and one message of support, all compressed into a single significant look. General Kovacs was present in full dress uniform, looking like a man who'd accepted that his career had taken an unexpected turn and was grimly determined to see it through. Queen Lysara presided from the central dais, her presence commanding immediate attention. She began speaking in Etherian, her words translated simultaneously into multiple languages through everyone's personal devices. We are gathered to witness the ratification of the claim right invoked by Princess Niara Kale 7 days ago. This ceremony will determine whether Sergeant Rowan Thrace of Humanity is accepted as royal consort with all attendant rights and responsibilities. A murmur rippled through the assembly, some supportive, many skeptical, a few openly hostile. Rowan felt the weight of thousands of eyes and reminded himself that he'd stood watch in more hostile environments. This was just political rather than military threat, probably. Niara stepped forward, her luminescence brilliant in the natural light. I invoke the claim right under our oldest laws. I name Rowan Thrace as chosen consort before these witnesses. Let any who question the validity of this claim speak now, or accept it as binding. Silence stretched for exactly 10 seconds, as prescribed by ceremony. Then an Etherian noble rose, one of the isolationist faction based on the intelligence files Rowan had memorized. I question the validity, he declared. The princess acted without proper counsel. The claimed individual is unsuitable for royal standing. This claim dishonors our traditions and should be dissolved. Several other nobles rose in support. The human delegation looked uncomfortable. Some clearly agreed but couldn't say so without appearing to reject Etherian sovereignty. Queen Lysara's voice cut through the objections. Do you challenge the princess's capacity to invoke the right? The noble hesitated. Challenging Niara's capacity meant suggesting she was incompetent or impaired, which would dishonor the entire royal line. I challenge the suitability of the chosen consort. Then present evidence of unsuitability as prescribed by law. The noble clearly hadn't expected to be required to provide formal evidence. He stammered something about human cultural incompatibility and insufficient preparation. Niara responded with devastating calm. The law requires consorts to demonstrate understanding of our customs and commitment to our people's welfare. Sergeant Thrace has studied our protocols intensively and survived 5 assassination attempts by those who profit from interspecies conflict. I submit that dedication under threat proves both understanding and commitment. She activated a display showing the evidence they'd compiled: financial transactions, assassination plots, proof of conspiracy to undermine the alliance. The assembled crowd watched in stunned silence as the scope of corruption became clear. These are the people questioning my choice, Niara continued. Not because Sergeant Thrace is unsuitable, but because he threatens their profitable schemes. I ask the court, who truly dishonors our traditions? A princess choosing a consort based on character and capability, or nobles coordinating with our supposed enemies to maintain conflict? The hall erupted in argument. Nobles accused in the evidence files were shouting denials. Human officials were making urgent calls to their superiors. Queen Lysara allowed exactly 90 seconds of chaos before speaking again. Silence. The single word carried absolute authority. This court will investigate the allegations presented, but the question before us now is simpler. Does the claim right stand? Princess Niara has invoked it properly. No valid challenge to her capacity has been presented. Therefore we proceed. She turned to Rowan, her expression unreadable. Sergeant Rowan Thrace, Do you accept the claim right invoked by Princess Niara Kale? Do you accept the responsibilities of royal consort and the duties that attend this position? This was it. The moment where Rowan could still refuse, could walk away from this impossible situation and return to his uncomplicated life of guarding doors and cataloging ammunition. Except his life was already complicated. The conspiracy existed whether he acknowledged it or not. People were dying to maintain profitable conflict whether he acted or not. And Princess Niara had chosen him, not because he was special, but because he was willing to do the work without performing it. Rowan spoke the formal phrase Niara had taught him, his pronunciation imperfect but clear enough. I accept the claim and embrace the duties it entails. I will serve with honor and dedication until death or dissolution releases me. The words hung in the air for a moment. Then Queen Lysara nodded. The claim right is ratified. Rowan Thrace is recognized as royal consort to Princess Niara Kale with all rights, protections, and responsibilities prescribed by law. Let it be recorded and witnessed. Niara's luminescence flared brilliant gold, relief and satisfaction, and something that might have been genuine happiness. She approached Rowan and performed a formal gesture he recognized from hours of study. Acknowledgement of equal standing. He returned the gesture, probably imperfectly, but close enough that the assembled crowd accepted it. Now comes the complicated part, Niara whispered as they turned to face the court together. This wasn't the complicated part. This was just ceremony. Now we actually have to address the conspiracy while half the court wants us dead. Outstanding, love that for us. They proceeded through the formal presentations, Rowan acknowledging each noble house in proper hierarchical order, receiving congratulations that ranged from genuine to performatively hostile. The ceremony took 3 hours, during which Rowan's feet went numb in his ceremonial boots, and he definitely made at least 2 protocol errors that would probably be analyzed by diplomatic scholars for years. But he survived it. No assassinations, no catastrophic mistakes, no accidental declarations of war through improper hand gestures. When it finally ended, Rowan found himself back in his quarters, now officially his permanent residence, with Niara reviewing the aftermath. The investigation has already begun, she said, studying reports on her datapad. 7 nobles have been detained. 3 human corporate executives are under investigation. Admiral Chen has been relieved of command for obstruction. Chen, Rowan remembered the admiral's attempts to suppress the evidence during the ceremony. He was receiving payments from one of the implicated corporations. The conspiracy ran deeper in human command than we realized. She looked up from her datapad. You're officially royal consort now. That grants you investigative authority equal to mine. Tomorrow we begin coordinated prosecutions. I'm really not qualified for this. You keep saying that. But you survived assassination attempts, learned enough protocol to avoid disaster, and stood before the assembled court without faltering. I think you're more qualified than you believe. Rowan collapsed into one of the impossible chairs, which had apparently learned his preferences and actually felt comfortable for once. 6 months ago, I was cataloging ammunition inventory. Now I'm a royal consort investigating interstellar conspiracy. This is objectively insane. Yes, Niara agreed. But it's productive insanity, which is preferable to the alternative. Lieutenant Chen visited that evening bringing coffee and congratulations. So, royal consort, that's definitely going in your permanent record. Martinez's betting pool is probably celebrating. Actually, you surviving the ceremony changed the odds dramatically. He's now taking bets on how long until you're running your own intelligence operation. She handed him the coffee. For what it's worth, the squad is proud of you. You took an impossible situation and somehow made it work. I mostly just didn't die and followed instructions. That's literally the foundation of military competence. You're applying it to royal politics. She paused. Some of us are being reassigned to joint human-Etherian security operations. Turns out your position is creating opportunities for cooperation that weren't possible before. After she left, Rowan stood on his balcony overlooking the palace gardens. Ithara Prime's twin moons cast double shadows across crystalline architecture that caught starlight and scattered it in patterns that looked almost intentional. His life had changed irrevocably. No going back to comfortable anonymity. No return to simple duties and predictable days. But maybe Chen was right. Maybe taking impossible situations and somehow making them work was its own kind of competence. 6 months later, Rowan stood in a different ceremonial hall on a human diplomatic station, presenting evidence to a joint commission investigating the conspiracy. Niara was beside him, her luminescence the businesslike amber gold he'd learned to associate with serious work. They'd spent the intervening months systematically dismantling the corruption networks, prosecuting officials, restructuring oversight systems, establishing new protocols for interspecies cooperation. It had been exhausting, occasionally dangerous, and surprisingly effective. The squad's betting pool had evolved. Martinez was now taking bets on when Rowan would write the tactical manual on applied military competence to civilian disasters. General Kovacs had been promoted to Joint Human-Etherian Command. Ambassador Patel was leading reformed diplomatic initiatives. Lieutenant Chen was training integrated security forces. And Rowan had somehow become someone whose opinions mattered in rooms full of people who'd been making important decisions for decades. "You're thinking too hard," Niara observed during a break in testimony. "Your luminescence equivalent, the expression humans make, suggests excessive contemplation. I was thinking about how I ended up here. 6 months ago, I was guarding doors. And now you're restructuring interstellar security frameworks. Quite the promotion." Her luminescence flickered warmer briefly. "Do you regret accepting the claim?" Rowan considered the question honestly. The last 6 months had been harder than anything in his military career. Constant political maneuvering, ongoing security threats, the exhausting work of actually implementing change rather than just identifying problems. But he'd also accomplished things that mattered. Peace accords that would have failed were succeeding. Joint operations that would have been sabotaged were functioning. People who would have died in coordinated attacks were alive. "No," he said finally. "I regret that you didn't warn me before invoking it, but I don't regret accepting. I appreciate the honesty." She smiled, an expression that looked increasingly natural on her face. "For what it's worth, I don't regret choosing you, even when you accidentally insult noble houses through improper gestures. That was 1 time, maybe 2 times, 3 at most. 7 times I've been counting." They returned to the commission hearing, where another conspirator was being presented with evidence of coordination to undermine the alliance. Rowan listened to testimony, analyzed patterns, and occasionally contributed observations from his unique perspective. Someone who understood both human military protocols and Etherian political structures. During the evening recess, General Kovacs pulled him aside. "You've done good work, Thrace. The joint command structure we've implemented based on your recommendations is actually functioning. That's rare in interspecies cooperation. I mostly just applied basic logistics to political problems, sir, which nobody else thought to do because they were too busy treating politics as something separate from practical reality." Kovacs paused. "I'm authorizing your promotion to lieutenant. You've earned it, even if your career path has been aggressively unconventional." "Thank you, sir, though I'm not sure how military rank works when you're also a royal consort." "Neither is anyone else. We're writing new regulations as we go." He almost smiled. "Try not to make them too complicated." That night, Rowan and Niara reviewed progress reports in quarters that had somehow become comfortable. A hybrid of human and Etherian design that reflected their partnership. "The isolationist factions are weakening," Niara said, highlighting political analyses. Public support for the alliance has increased 17% since the conspiracy was exposed. The Joint Operations Chen is training, are exceeding performance expectations. So we're winning, Rowan said. We're making progress. Winning implies completion, and this work never truly completes. She set down her datapad. But yes, we're accomplishing things that seemed impossible 6 months ago. Rowan looked at the woman who'd cornered him in a maintenance corridor. No, who'd strategically chosen him in the luminous pavilion because she needed someone uncorrupted by systems that had forgotten their purpose. She'd upended his life, thrust him into impossible situations, and somehow trusted that he'd be capable of handling them. She'd been right. Not because he was special, but because someone had to do the work, and he'd been stubborn enough not to quit when it got difficult. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For choosing me. For trusting that I'd figure things out. For not giving up when I made protocol errors or questioned whether this would work." Her luminescence shifted to that warm gold that suggested genuine affection. "Thank you for accepting, for surviving assassination attempts, for learning our customs without losing yourself, for reminding me that sometimes the best people for impossible tasks are the ones who have never been told they're qualified." Someone knocked, Kelrick with updated security protocols, and a reminder that they had an early meeting with the Joint Commission tomorrow. Rowan reviewed the schedule and felt the familiar exhaustion of someone doing work that mattered but never stopped. Then he looked at Niara, at the evidence of progress they'd made together, at the future they were building through unglamorous, persistent effort. "You know what's strange?" he said. "I spent years thinking my work didn't matter much. Keeping systems running seemed small compared to big strategic decisions. But everything we're doing now, all these alliance improvements and security reforms, they only work because someone handles the details. Someone makes sure the basic systems function." "That's not strange," Niara said. "That's wisdom. Civilizations don't fall because of grand failures. They fall because enough people stopped maintaining the foundations." The next morning, they returned to the commission hearing and continued the work of building something better than what they'd inherited. It was tedious, occasionally dangerous, and absolutely essential. And Lieutenant, Rowan Thrace, royal consort and professional problem solver, intended to keep showing up and doing the work. Even if Martinez's betting pool had evolved to taking wagers on when he'd accidentally prevent a war through proper ammunition inventory management. Some things never changed, but some things did, and that was worth protecting.